Welcome to Willie's Workshop again. Here's another car that needs evaluation, little green racer. Now underneath it says Empire Made ELM Toys. And I got this in England, I think in a market down in somewhere like Portobello Road, I think it was. And I wanted it because it had this box, which is broken, you know, this actual steering box, button box, but they're very hard to find, so I thought I'd buy this and see what I can do. So let's go evaluate it. Yeah, so it has the box with the top and some pieces with the switch, toggle switch needs repairing, a motor, and these two pins were sticking out, but I've actually just fitting them in here, which I'll show you close up. And I've kind of pried the top off. It was glued, but I pried it open because, I mean, it's the only way to fix it. So let's see what we got. Yeah, so this is obviously the contacts for the motor. There's two little things on the end of the wire. They brush up along the side of the motor. So what I'm going to do, I bent it a little bit, but we'll stick it in here if we can get it in. There we go. And it's not exactly staying in there, but I'll hold it once I get the batteries up. So we'll take the other end of the wire and put this, I'll back off so you can see this. Oh, wrong way. Okay. So I have the batteries here, and I have jump leads. And what I'm going to do is just put them on the end of this wire here and see if it runs. And that'll be a big bonus. It'll be a good start anyway. So I'm not getting anything at the moment. Maybe I have to turn that the other way around. Ah. Even if it runs at all is a good sign. So we have that problem. We just have to get this epoxied in somehow so it works all the time. Right? So that's one of those issues dealt with. The second issue is this is a sprung load. The spring is a bit dead here, but it's a sprung load steering wheel, so when you pull the cable it should go back to straight or back to the very back, but it's a little bit, you know, pulled. I'll fix that. Just this little spring here, see it? It's not pulling it back enough. So the cable is working. Now we have the motor problem here, and there's a glue mark on the bottom of this motor here. So I'm reckoning that this was epoxied in a bit like this at an angle, and that ran the car. I suppose we could just test it out quickly. So I'm just trying to get this motor to run this actual thing to see the wheels turn. There she goes. So that's basically, that contact is glued in, and I put the motor in like that. It's going to run again. It's in reverse at the moment, but I can switch it to minus and plus. So there we have it. Disconnect. So that's the troubleshooting done. So this one isn't going to be too much of a problem, fixing this end up and getting it running. All we need then is a plastic hose to come out of this niche in here. See here? It has to come out of here, all this wiring and everything. We'll take this wiring motor out of the way a minute. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see it. Right? Yeah. So there's a dent in here. And what we want to do is take all this out of here and run it up a tube, and we're going to run it up a tube when we find one, and most likely have to fix this down here in here somehow, so or epoxy it in the tube so the tube doesn't keep moving. And that's it. Okay. So that's the evaluation of the green car, and then of course this has to be glued back on when everything's running perfectly again. I mean, you know, it's not too bad a deal. So, and of course we got to get the we have to get this box all up and running again for it. So there we go. So I'm going to go start looking for the parts. Yeah, so I've noticed another little issue was this cable was lifting out. So I've repaired that. That's basically with a Velar gun, like a soldering gun. I melted this bit of plastic on top so this cable doesn't keep falling out. But I noticed that this mount here for the steering and this brass piece was in here. Is supposed to be out here to hold this in place. So I've got to make some kind of a little piece of tin to epoxy on this motor mount and wheelbase mount because it's broke off here. You can see there it's broke off. I'll just zoom in a little more so you can see it even better. There, like over the top of this here is broke off. The plastic from here to here. So we're going to have to fix that with a little piece of tin, maybe epoxy to the side of this mount here. And then we can mount the motor. So it is beginning to take shape, so I must make something for that now, like a slip-on piece that goes over each side so that this doesn't move anymore. And then we'll carry on after that, epoxy, whoop there, after the epoxy dries, I'll carry on with the motor and that. Yeah, I spent the last bit of an hour or two making this little clip here that goes down to hold this wheel down on that chassis that cracked off. But I had a little bit of difficulty because the motor has to come in on top now and fit it perfectly in like this. So now that I have that, I'm going to epoxy this in and we'll have that ready to go. And it seems to be moving fairly freely at the moment. This has to sit in exactly right, that piece there, and then the motor goes on top like that, and then we have a fairly good turning wheel. So that'll be that set. So we're getting very close to having the major problem here in the back motor fixed. Just a bit of epoxy now. Brass fitting in there. So that will keep the wheel fairly straight. Now I'm just putting epoxy on this metal piece I made. This is just to hold the shaft in place. It should work. I don't get too much glue on me. Now one side is tapered back, that's for the motor. So we got to get it in this way. Oh, I gotta work my fingers. Bit messy. This goes down. You see that? Oh, okay. That goes down there like that, like a clip. Here, like that. All I gotta do is clean it up a bit. I might have to leave this dry before I put the motor in. As you can see. There we go. We gotta make sure the wheel still turns. It's a little messy looking. Once I clean it up, it'll be okay. And then the motor is gonna sit here on top like this, which I think I'll leave right now and epoxy that in later, but let's make sure it fits. There she goes. Okay, I'm just going to clean this up and just leave it dry. And then we'll come back to the motor later. You have to have patience with these things, you know. And we'll move on to some other part of the car. Yes, so I epoxied the motor in as well. LePage epoxy. Look, it's all running smoothly. I'm going to stick this up Sorry, there we go. I'm going to put this up on a shelf to dry for 24 hours now. And we're going to have the basics of this motor done here, which I'm quite happy about. So I'm really happy that that's all done in one go. I'll clean it up later on and see what it looks like. I have a little spot here in the back here that needs a bit of epoxy. Oh, sorry, there you can see I'm just putting a bit of epoxy in that hole there. Every little bit will count in the end to hold this in place. So there we go. Where am I? I'm having a hard time finding this because I'm zoomed in. There you go. There we go, all epoxied in. Most likely just tape on there and let it dry. First thing I'm going to fix on the switcher box that's broken is this tab here. So I basically made a little tab out of metal. I'll put it in a tweezer so we can see it better. Folded over a piece of tin so it's a little stronger, doubled up like. Slot in above the other tab switch. I'm going to epoxy that in there, and then later on I'll just put a little button on here, and this will press down on that contact there and make contact again like it's supposed to. Now at the moment it's not touching it, but it will press down on that in the end. If we put something in there, it'll press down and make the contact I need. And it'll be both at the same time. So I'm going to just epoxy this in as well, so this dries with the motor and that. So I have two things that are already kind of prepped, and then we can move on to the next problem. One problem at a time is the best here. So I'm just going to epoxy that in with IPL. And here it is, epoxied in. Let it dry. I'll put a little contact on the bottom most likely later on, and it should work. Got to keep solving these problems, I suppose. Yeah, just going to clean up the epoxy around the motor that I put on last night, so it looks a little better. And then we can, either touch it up or whatever. Here comes the Dremel on. Looks pretty good, and I have to do this switch as well here. Remember the switch we did? Pretty happy with that. So I fixed the spring on the steering down in here. Remember we said it was a bit slack? So I've made it so if you pull this steering this way, it goes back to straight. The cable does need loosening out. It's a little stiff. I can see when I use the pliers that it's giving me a bit of trouble, but it does work still. We have to put a WD-40 in there, see? A little bit stiff going back. It'll loosen out. So there we go. That's another piece done, and the switch just needs a tab on it now to press down on the contact, which I might just put the plastic piece back on with the epoxy, the one broken off piece here that I have back on here, and epoxy it on, and then it'll work fine. Just clean it up a little bit more and we're done. Yes, so here's the metal strip I epoxied into that slot, and now I put on the broken piece back onto the metal piece with epoxy, so there's a tab to push down because it's the easiest way, and it'll work fine. It's working, so just let that dry for 24 hours and that's ready to go. And I've done the springs, so a little WD-40 down the cable, loosen it out, and we'll see where we go from there. I've just bent the contacts a little, put it in 3 or 4 times to get the contacts in the right place, and now if you look here, I just epoxied in contacts here. You can see the 2 contacts, and the brass is going in the side of the motor there, so we'll just give her a touch and test it. Oh, the red's off. Hang on. Here we go. Just touching the battery right now. Right? And if I disconnect on the top of the wire and then connect again. So I have this working, and now I'm going to leave that dry. So that's all the stuff I felt needed to be done right now. So happy with that. Bring up a little more here. Poured WD-40 down the end of the cable. Put some on this side as well, and then rubbed it all along the metal covering so it seeps in. And what I've got now is I've got a bit better movement. And when you pull, it pulls the spring, and when you go back, you just push lightly. So the spring doesn't bring it back yet to its position, but it's okay because then it can, you can keep it wherever you want. It'll go straight if you want. Look. Or it'll go left, it'll go right. So I like that setting. I have a little wire sticking out here. It's because I tighten that even more. So I just need to snip that off so it doesn't stick out so much. And basically the motor is all epoxied in, and so is the contact, and everything's running. So that part of the car is completed, and our switch is drying here. And that needs another 12, 15 hours or whatever. And that'll go back in there. So now we have a steering problem. Yeah, I'm making the, I love it when I can't find a pointer. Here we go. I'm making these little pillars for the, or the crossbars for the steering wheel. And I made this all a bunch of brass pieces I've laying around that are, various bits and pieces. And this had a shaft, so I built that in there. So it turns for steering. And now I'm just putting in the kind of steering wheel look, as you can call it. It's taking me a little time. I'm just going to glue these in because they're not going to ever really be touched. So I'm just snipping this and then filing it. It's the trick is put your finger on this end and then it won't fly away on you. There it is. It's a tweezer's job, so very close this time, very good. And I got to file this off a little to get it in there. That'll go in like that. Isn't that lovely? I think it's in. I'm not too sure whether it's in all the way or not. A little bit more on the file. That looks pretty straight. I'll do the other end straight as well. That's a straight piece. Should fit in this time. I think that side's down. There we go. That looks pretty good for a wheel. I mean, I put a little bit of WD-40 on this. I mean, what am I saying? WD-40. Super glue. Ooh, that's a bit of a big drop. Oh, it's moving. I just got to replace that dental tool. Try to get it pretty much center here. That looks good, doesn't it? Right, I think that's it. I think I'll call that a success. I have to still put on the connection below for actually pulling the cable, but I'll do that later. I have the steering wheel fitted with the cross membranes to make it look more like a steering wheel. A little toggle switch. I think that's back and forth. It's like sprung load. That's all you do. And all I got to do now is make sure that this thing stays in here somehow. My cross membrane, whatever that is. And make it pull the cable. And we're on the road to victory. Yeah. So how did I lock this cable in? Now on the other side it's already held up here by a point, so I didn't have to do anything here. And the casing doesn't really go anywhere. But I made two little holes on each side of this tube, And if you look on the other side, I twisted a wire around really tightly so that this can't move when you're turning your steering wheel. So you can see the twist here, there's a twist there. I don't know if you can see it. I'll put it up a bit more and put the light on it. There's a twist in here on the wiring. So I basically put like a staple through the two holes and then brought it through here and then twisted it. And that holds the cable in place so it can't move when you're pushing back on the switch on the steering. So that's all I had to do. That's how I held that in place. So just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, so I made a steering wheel, and underneath I soldered on a piece of tin and put the wire for the steering around it and then soldered it because it needs to push and pull, right? And so if we get the car here, then we get this here, you can see it's pushing and pulling the steering. So it's working again. Now I can just take these two wires and put them through this hole and put this on with the switch for the time being. And we'll go to the next step. So quite happy with that. So I've put it all together. Here's the turning of the wheels. There's not much steering in them. They're kind of, you know. And here's the motor. You have to put it down on the floor and stand behind it, and it goes much better. Forward, reverse, and we have her all fixed. We'll just glue it together and then I'll do a demo on the floor. And we're done. Are running, and I got the switcher in my hand and push forward button, this forward button, and reverse, and I can steer this way. It steers, but you know, your cable can help it, right? Yeah, you know, they weren't exactly brilliant, but they worked. Steering's working. It's a kid's toy, so not the most expensive one. Of course, I'm not walking with it either, so that makes a difference. Away she goes. Other button. Reverse. Working great. There we go.